So this time the news is in my neck of the woods. And in fact, it's in Cornwall, not too far away from where I grew up. So I grew up down here just on the sort of eastern side of the city of Plymouth, more towards, the edge of the city, more towards the countryside. And if you drive across the Tamar Bridge, you are in Cornwall. And one thing you might notice here on the census map is how overwhelmingly white it is. And in fact, it's one of the least diverse areas of England. And I think Plymouth is actually the only city that is vastly majority white left in England. And so it's interesting to me that these sorts of proposals are even happening in the first place, because what is happening is that Muslims wanted to build a massive Muslim cemetery, graveyard, in Cornwall, and not too far from the Devonshire-Cornish border. And if you're not from Britain, you might not know that Devon and Cornwall are places that people associate with going on holiday because they're lovely. And I'm a little bit biased because I grew up there, but lovely, quaint countryside. You might see thatched cottages. You've got nice national parks, lots of open ground. You're free to go camping. Lovely beaches as well on the coastline, surfing, lots of outdoorsy activities. And lots of people across Britain have fond memories of visiting because a lot of the area relies on tourism because it's, lovely, quaint and English, beautiful. It's still English even now, and you've got lovely countryside. Personally, if I had the choice, I would still live in Devon, but alas, my work takes me elsewhere, although it's maybe less than 3 hours drive to get back home again from where I live, so it's not too far away. Relatively speaking, to an American, that's probably nothing. In England, that's considered okay, it's reasonable, it's still a bit of a trek. But the area it was being proposed is Callington. This is a place I've actually been to before, and you might notice here in the screenshot I've highlighted a part of Callington, 99.3% white. And interesting here that a massive stronghold of the native British population, English, Cornish, whatever you want to call them, still lives here. It's not diverse whatsoever. You can see the city of Plymouth here. Some of it's slightly lighter, and that's simply because it's a university town, and I've been to that university before. Mainly Chinese students. The most diverse areas, funnily enough, in the city of Plymouth, according to the ONS map, are the areas where all the shops are and no one lives. But most of it is vastly majority, over 90% white, normally 95+% white, which for Britain's scale, a third of London is white British, so 2/3 is not. This is very different than what a lot of people are used to, and people forget that these places exist, which is great because it means that my homeland, the place where I'm from, I'm sort of very much a Devonshire nationalist. If I could fly a flag in my, on my property, I would fly a Devonshire flag. It's just the English flag, but different colours. But these sorts of things, this is a very proud area, long history, and particularly the Cornish are very patriotic for their county, and so they should. It's a beautiful county, lovely people, and I've obviously spent a tremendous amount of time there, and in fact over Christmas I went on a nice long hike through Cornwall because it's, it feels like home to me because it's, I grew up just on the other side of the border and it's a short drive, short train trip away, and when I speak to Cornish people, they say, oh, I'm only from, crossing Devon, and that's okay, because sometimes they don't like outsiders, particularly people from London, because they buy places up and they try and remove the spirit of the place. And this is important for the Muslim aspect because the area is sort of radicalised against Londoners coming in and buying things up. And these are normally white Londoners, by the way, actual native British people, because the cultural gap between people who live in London and people who live in the proper West Country, like Devon and Cornwall, they're not really the same. And in fact, me growing up, the term Londoner was an insult, suggesting that someone's acting in a sort of effeminate and sort of multicultural or cosmopolitan way. Just like, you're weird. What are you being like that? You Londoner, what's wrong with you? It's just people who are rude, people who are unaware of their low culture, things like this, basically. And this is obviously a part of the world that I'm very fond of, and I didn't want a 9,000 plot Muslim burial site in this countryside, which the fact that this is even proposed is disgusting to me. I don't want Muslims in what I see to be the sacred land of Britain in the first place. I don't think they belong here. But the idea of, in a beautiful patch of Cornish countryside, having Muslim graves where they have no place to be is disgusting. But thankfully, there was public backlash and it was withdrawn. And so I wanted to read this article from the Daily Mail to see how this can be done, because, of course, the elites are going to try this sort of thing, you know, the people in government, and having a sort of blueprint of how to do this and how to reject things in your area would be useful. And so it says, a planning row erupted after a charity, the Gardens of Mercy, requested approval to convert 10 acres, it's quite a lot of land, of grazing land into a cemetery for the Islamic community. What would be hilarious is if it was grazing land for pigs, but I mean, you don't need these plans for resistance now, do you? The application was met with dozens of objections, with many locals saying it is inappropriate in such a rural area. And I think that they're very relieved that this has not gone through. Concerns were raised about the increased traffic, flood risk, loss of agricultural land, and that the area could become a regional site for Muslim burials. I think what people in polite society didn't mention is, we don't want your kind around here, which is something spoken behind closed doors, because people in the West Country understand that it's not very welcoming, it doesn't make people like you. However, lots of people think that way, and I don't think the West Country becoming a Muslim stronghold would be popular with anyone from down there. I mean, I think part of the reason I have the politics I do is because I grew up in this sort of area, which is one of the areas more hostile to outsiders than lots of other areas of the UK, other than maybe Scotland, if you're English, that is. If you're foreign in another way, that's fine, apparently. Obviously, not all Scots think that. My Scottish father certainly doesn't. Anyway, the application to change the use of agricultural grazing land in Callington to a green burial ground has now been formally withdrawn, despite also attracting letters of support from members of the Muslim community expressing the need for such a site. Which Muslim community? Where? Not in Cornwall, not in Plymouth. I mean, even in the riots in August, there was a counter demonstration and about 5 Muslims turned up, with knives, of course, because why wouldn't they? They're not going to be punished for it, chanting Allahu Akbar on the putting green in Plymouth. Didn't achieve anything because the native Plymouthians just pelted them with bottles and they all ran away, which is a wonderful nature is healing moment, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, if you're chanting Allahu Akbar, I think getting hit by a glass bottle is the least. I mean, chanting it with a knife with the threat of, stabbing someone, that's a pretty light punishment. Muslims who live in the country are currently unable to be buried near their homes as there are no sites that meet the requirements of their religion. Here's an idea. Have you seen the Middle East? Have you seen North Africa? There's lots of land there. It's all desert. It's great. It's easier to bury someone in a desert because sand, you can dig it up. It's easy. It's not like Devonshire or Cornish dirt where there are lots of rocks in it, granite, things that are very difficult to dig up. Just saying, if you want to bury your Muslims, how about sticking them in the sand where you come from? That's a good idea, isn't it? In an official notice posted on the council's planning portal, a spokesperson wrote, "Cornwall Council hereby confirms that the above-mentioned application has been withdrawn." Dr. Salim Mahadik, the chairperson applying on behalf of the charity, said they were disappointed at having to take a step back. How about a flight back to where you came from? But here's the town. Look, you can see it all in one picture. Look at how lovely the countryside is. I'll tell you what that needs. It needs lots of Muslim burial grounds. The town of Callington, lovely, nice, quaint place. I'll tell you what it needs, a mosque. What it needs is more kebab shops, some barber shops. They need some more drug gangs. They need more people smuggling. That's what they need, according to some people, apparently. Here's the supposed planning thing. Notice how they blurred out the face of the person. Interesting. But yeah, you see sort of British equivalents of this sometimes with a little stone plaque, trees planted. Yeah, it just doesn't belong in Britain, does it? Also, our burials down our way are very different to a lot of the rest of the UK sometimes, and so it's even less befitting in some ways. But anyway, a total of nearly 350 comments were received from the public, around half objecting to the scheme. Only half. Among those objecting was Brian Hutchings, who wrote, "The application isn't suitable in a Cornish farming community area." A very, non-controversial way of saying, yeah, you don't belong here. There is not enough Muslim people living in Cornwall to justify the need for this burial ground, which is a perfectly good point. And nor should there be Muslim people living in Cornwall, or the rest of the UK for that matter. Another objector, Melvin Simmons, wrote, "The proposed burial ground appears disproportionately large relative to the needs of our community." Yeah, well, you don't need a Muslim burial ground at all. I'd be surprised if Callington had a single Muslim in it, because it is a small Cornish town, which traditionally, the only time Muslims would turn up to Cornwall is when the Barbary slave traders would come and capture entire Cornish towns. That is the relationship with the Southwest and Islam, is that they used to come along and carry out raids and enslave us. Bit insulting that they enslaved our ancestors sometimes. We never saw those people again. And then you're building a graveyard for them in our land. Sort of salt in the wound, isn't it? Because it was particularly focused on Devon and Cornwall in the first place, because it's the closest to North Africa. And then it says, "Given the size of Callington, it is unclear why a burial ground of this scale would be necessary, raising concerns that it may serve as a broader catchment area and draw visitors from distant locations." Very distant locations indeed. They're going to fly in on their magic carpets and they're going to be landing in Callington, and the entire ethos, the entire way of living in that area would forever be ruined because of the need to, provide a cemetery for these foreign people that don't actually care about our ways or customs and aren't adhering to them because they're building their own segregated cemetery. Our area has strong Christian traditions, and local burial grounds have historically served the immediate community, respecting the values and character of our town. Yes, that's the stuff. Well done, Melvin Simmons. "The proposal seems misaligned with the cultural and spiritual values held by many residents and would fundamentally alter the rural agricultural character of the area." I wholeheartedly agree. This is exactly right. It doesn't belong here. It's not part of Cornish culture. And because the Cornish are all a bunch of good lads and ladies, they are much more astute at spotting these sorts of attacks on their culture because they have a strong in-group preference. Cornish people like each other more than, say, Londoners like each other. And if you've ever been on the tube, that is not a controversial thing to say. Even making eye contact with someone in London is seen as a threat, whereas when you're walking along in Cornwall, saying hello to people in the street is normal. People are friendly to each other. When I go back home to South Devon, you start chatting to people in the street, friendly. People are nice. People wish you Merry Christmas as you walk by. People say, make chit-chat at the bus stop, say, "Oh, weather's not very nice," and then starts into a conversation, because people have a way of life that is all too rare nowadays in Britain. And it's unfortunate because it's what I grew up with and it's lovely. It's what makes me feel at home. It makes me feel like doing things that benefit the community in a more altruistic and selfless way, because I feel like there is a community, and a community that's worth doing things for, because people are kind and nice, and it makes me want to give back to them. This is how you organically create a good society. You don't create a pleasant and nice livable society by working against these sorts of things. So it carries on to say, another added, the proposed superscale burial site is incongruent to the local population need. Specifically, there is no local need for a Muslim burial site. They've been very restrained here. These are very PR-friendly statements. It carries on to say, regardless of the size or number of burial plots, this change of use application would have a detrimental impact on the environment, changing a rural agricultural community forever, and setting a precedent to future absurd applications. And it is absurd because it does not belong here. Another objector, Catherine Sawford, wrote, the development is having an impact on people's mental health in the area. Yeah, well, I wonder if people were perhaps concerned about some of the associated problems with an increase in Muslim population, say for their children's safety, for their safety in public, because of course they have explosive tempers, some Muslims. Some people are not even commenting in fear they will be tagged as discriminatory. That's a big problem, isn't it? Just be discriminatory. I mean, at the end of the day, if it comes to, oh, people's feelings are hurt, or the entire way of life of my community as a continuity of thousands of years of my ancestors living in this place, I'll take the latter over the former, thanks. To have a development on the doorstep that is making people feel anxious and scared. And you should feel anxious and scared because we've seen the hostility that the Muslim population has to the people of Britain. Look at all the Muslims coming out in the August riots in Britain with weapons ready for blood. That's all you can say. They turned up with knives and bats. Even when the native British people who were causing disorder did not do the same. So they were willing to escalate. They're more than happy to start trouble. And if they have this level of hostility, of course, the Quran teaches that you can basically treat non-believers however you wish. They're less than human. That is a reason to be worried. And it carries on to say, this is a rural agricultural area. A cemetery of the size will disrupt the area's long-standing traditions and raise concerns over a shift in demographics. That's the important part, the shift in demographics, and the increased visitation to the site. Another objector, Jason Berry, described the proposal as incongruent with our community's character and traditions. Oh, this is good. Oh, it makes me glad to be from this part of the world. Tell them, yes, it is not fitting with our way of life and our traditions. If more people asserted this sort of stuff more regularly, these sorts of things wouldn't happen. You know, we'd have mass deportations overnight if everyone just woke up one day and was just like, you know what? I actually like our traditions. I like our way of life. I don't want to live in an Islamic country because, funnily enough, all of the Muslim countries have a lower quality of life than I do, except the ones that are backed with oil money, and then it's an empty vessel, a sort of mirror image of the worst excesses of Western civilization. Bit of a mouthful. Maybe don't say all that. But he added only 0.2% of the local population identifies as Muslim, indicating minimal local demand for such a facility. And that's probably like one person who's like half Muslim. Because I don't even know how many people. Maybe there's like one guy who's like Barry from Four Lions. And with nearly 9,000 plots proposed, the project aims to serve communities as far away as Plymouth and beyond. There aren't many Muslims in Plymouth either. I know there. I was there. I grew up there, and I was there only, a couple of weeks ago for quite some time. I didn't see a single one. That's why it's nice. The scale of this project and its exclusivity contradicts the idea and values of a community that has strong ties to Christian traditions and agricultural heritage. And then the chairperson for who was trying to start all of this says he's trying its best to meet the needs of a relatively deprived community in Devon and Cornwall. That's just insulting. It's like, oh, we're trying to help you out. You're deprived. We're coming to bless you with our dead bodies for some reason. We're clearly disappointed at being forced to take a backward step for now, but we cannot give up on the people who have invested their hope in our charity. Have you heard of Muslim countries? They're more than happy to take your dead. The charity's main objective is to blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. Obviously, this is good. If enough people in your community say no, and the council isn't entirely poisoned to your people's needs, you can resist these sorts of things. It's wonderful. This is all you need to do. Just have people have a focus on their local area, tell them about the side effects of living alongside Islam when you're not Islamic yourself, and enforce your way of life upon the people who would take it from you. Say, these are my traditions, this is my way of life, I'm not budging. In fact, the only way you can live here is if you adopt them, which is normal. That is how the rest of the world works. And it's just this weird aberration in Europe and North America, and maybe Australia to a certain extent, and New Zealand, but only to it was a very small window in time that we've had this attitude. And the norm throughout all of human history in every culture ever is that you adapt or die. And I personally don't want Muslims coming in and adopting the Cornish culture anyway. I think Cornwall would be better if it remained entirely Cornish and it's not diluted by people who don't belong there. But that's just me. But yes, a bit of good news, and it's perfect evidence that if you have a good community spirit, you can resist these sorts of things.